I still remember the day I handed my parents the keys to that mansion, a $4 million home sitting on a quiet hill, overlooking the city skyline. It was everything they'd ever dreamed of. Growing up, we didn't have much. My parents worked multiple jobs, sacrificing everything just to keep food on the table and the lights on. So when life finally turned around for me, when my business took off and success came after years of struggle, the first thing I wanted to do was give them the comfort they'd never had. Watching them step through those doors, their faces lighting up like kids again, was the best feeling I've ever had. I thought that moment would bring nothing but peace and happiness to our family. But I had no idea that gift would end up tearing us apart. The house was perfect. Wide open rooms filled with sunlight, a huge kitchen where Mom could finally bake without bumping elbows, and a backyard big enough for Dad to plant every fruit tree he'd ever talked about. For the first time in decades, they had a home where they could rest, host family gatherings, and enjoy their retirement. My younger brother, Marcus, was there the day I surprised them. He clapped, smiled, and hugged me, saying how proud he was. I believed him. We'd been close our whole lives, or at least I thought we were. But something in his eyes that day felt off. Maybe it was envy, maybe it was pride, or maybe I was just too caught up in the joy of the moment to notice. At first, everything seemed fine. My parents settled in and called me every other day, telling me how much they loved the house. They finally had friends over, hosted dinners, and Mom even joined a gardening club in the neighborhood. It felt like all the years of struggle were finally behind us. But then, things started to shift when Marcus began visiting more often, sometimes unannounced, sometimes with his wife and kids in tow. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, it was our parents' home and family is family. But soon those visits turned into sleepovers, and sleepovers turned into weekend stays. Before long, he and his family were practically living there. Mom didn't say anything for a while, but I could tell from her tone on the phone that something wasn't right. She'd say things like, "You know how your brother can be," or, "The kids are a handful but it's temporary." I wanted to believe that. But one night she called me, her voice shaky, and told me that Marcus had started bringing in furniture. He said it was just to make the kids comfortable, but she could tell he was moving in for good. When I confronted him about it, he laughed it off, saying, "Come on man, it's not like they don't have the space. You gave them a mansion." He made it sound harmless, but the way he said it felt dismissive, like he was entitled to what wasn't his. I tried to keep peace. I reminded myself that family arguments only make things worse, especially when money's involved. But the tension kept growing. Marcus's wife started acting like she ran the place, rearranging furniture, making house rules, even telling my mom how to keep things organized. It wasn't long before Mom started spending more time in her room just to avoid conflict. Dad, usually the calm one, began losing his patience too. One afternoon when I dropped by to visit, I noticed half the family portraits were gone. In their place were Marcus's wedding photos and his kids' school pictures. When I asked Mom about it, she just smiled weakly and said, "It's okay, honey. It's just pictures." But I could see the hurt in her eyes. Weeks later, everything exploded. I got a call from my mother, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said Marcus had told them to leave their own home. My heart stopped. I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe she misunderstood him, that there was an argument and things got heated. But when I drove over that night, the truth hit me harder than I could have imagined. Their things, my parents' clothes, photo albums, even Dad's old record player, were packed in boxes by the front door. Marcus stood in the living room, arms crossed, telling me that my parents didn't appreciate what he was trying to do for them. His voice was calm, like he'd rehearsed it. I remember staring at him, speechless. "Do you hear yourself?" I said. "This isn't your house. You can't just kick them out." But he didn't back down. He said they'd agreed to move in with my aunt temporarily until things got sorted. That was a lie. Mom and Dad had nowhere to go. My father, a proud man who never asked anyone for anything, stood there quietly, gripping one of the moving boxes with tears in his eyes. I'd never seen him look so defeated. I could feel anger burning in my chest, but beneath it was heartbreak. This was the house that was supposed to bring our family closer. The gift that was meant to show love and gratitude had turned into a battlefield. I couldn't wrap my head around how my own brother could do something like this, not to me but to the people who raised us both. That night, I helped my parents pack the rest of their belongings into my car. As we drove away from the mansion, Mom kept looking back at the house, whispering, "I can't believe this is happening." I promised her I'd make it right. But deep down, I knew fixing this wouldn't be easy. Marcus had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored, and I had a decision to make, one that could change our family forever. The next morning I called my lawyer. I didn't want to fight, but I couldn't stand by and let my parents be treated like strangers in a home I bought for them. Part of me hoped Marcus would come to his senses, apologize, and make things right. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about respect, family, and the difference between generosity and being taken advantage of. As I stood outside my parents' small temporary apartment later that week, I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. What started as a simple act of love had turned into a test of loyalty, and I was about to find out just how far I'd have to go to protect the people who gave me everything. And when I finally showed up at that mansion again, the same house that once symbolized love and pride, I wasn't just their son anymore. I was the man who had to take back what was rightfully theirs. What happened next, even I didn't see coming. The day after I stood outside that mansion, everything felt heavier. My parents tried to act like they were fine, but I could see the sadness in every quiet glance they shared. My mother moved slower and my father barely spoke. Their apartment was small, a one-bedroom place above a grocery store, nothing like the space and light of the mansion they had just lost. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator all night and the cars outside their window, sounds that didn't belong in the life I had worked so hard to give them. I kept asking myself how it all went wrong. Marcus and I had grown up in the same small house, sharing everything from bunk beds to hand-me-down clothes. Our parents raised us with love even when money was tight. We were taught to take care of each other. So how did my own brother become the person who could turn our parents out of their home? I thought maybe something happened. Pressure, debt, jealousy, something that could explain it. But the more I replayed it, the harder it was to excuse what he'd done. I started digging into things quietly, trying not to worry my parents. They didn't want me to make it worse. My mom kept saying, "Don't fight with your brother, honey. Families break over money." But this wasn't just about money anymore. I wanted to understand what Marcus was thinking, what had pushed him to do something so cruel. So I started by visiting a few of his old friends, people who might know what he'd been up to lately. That's when I began to realize how deep things might really go. One of his friends mentioned that Marcus had been struggling financially. He tried starting a construction company a few years back, but it never took off. Then there were rumors that he'd borrowed money from the wrong people who didn't take kindly to missed payments. When I heard that, a lot started to make sense. The sudden move into the mansion, the way he asserted control, and how quickly he'd taken over. Maybe he saw the house not as a home for our parents, but as an escape, a chance to fix his mistakes by taking something that wasn't his. Still, knowing that didn't make it easier to accept. I couldn't understand why he didn't just come to me. I would have helped him if he'd asked. That thought kept circling in my mind as I drove past the mansion later that week. The lights were on, kids' toys scattered across the lawn, and my brother's car sat in the driveway like it belonged there. From the outside it looked like a happy home. But behind those walls was something broken, a family split in two. I didn't knock. I just sat there in my car for a while, staring at the house I'd worked years to afford. I thought about every late night I'd spent building my business, every sacrifice I made to get to that point. I didn't buy that house for recognition. I did it because I wanted my parents to finally have peace. But now that peace had been stolen from them and from me, the next day I met with my lawyer. He told me I had every legal right to take back the property. It was in my name, fully paid for, no shared ownership. But that didn't make it simple. Kicking out my own brother and his kids would only make things uglier. "You have to decide what kind of battle this will be," my lawyer said. "Family fights over money rarely end clean." I knew he was right. But I also knew that if I didn't stand up now, my parents would lose more than just their home. They'd lose their dignity. Meanwhile, Marcus wasn't answering my calls. Every time I tried to reach him, it went to voicemail. When I finally texted him, all he replied was, "You don't understand. I'm taking care of things." Taking care of what? That message made no sense. It felt like he was trying to justify something to himself more than to me. Mom started worrying about him even after everything. That's just who she is, always finding space to forgive, even when she shouldn't have to. She asked me to talk to him calmly, to give him a chance to explain. So one night I drove back to the mansion again. This time I knocked. When Marcus opened the door, he looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. His wife wasn't around, but I could hear the TV from the living room and the faint sound of the kids upstairs. For a moment it felt almost normal, like old times. But then he said, "If you're here to take the house, don't bother." His voice was cold. I told him I wasn't there to fight, that I just wanted to talk. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Talk about what? How you think money gives you control over everyone?" That hit me hard. I tried to explain that the house was meant for our parents, that I only wanted them to have comfort. But he wouldn't listen. He said our parents didn't need all that space, and that he was making better use of it. His words felt rehearsed, like he'd been telling himself that story just to live with what he'd done. The conversation ended with him slamming the door. I stood outside for a few minutes, listening to the faint hum of laughter from inside, laughter that didn't belong to my parents. That moment broke something in me. I drove away, gripping the steering wheel so tight my hands hurt. I knew then that there was no easy fix. Over the next few days I kept thinking about how things got this way. My parents were too old to keep moving around, and the idea of them living in that cramped apartment while my brother enjoyed their dream home ate at me. Still, I didn't want to cause more pain. So instead of jumping straight to legal action, I decided to wait. I wanted to give Marcus one last chance to do the right thing. But days turned into weeks and nothing changed. My parents stopped hearing from him completely. The only news we got was from neighbors who said they saw strangers coming and going from the mansion. People who didn't look like family or friends. That worried me even more. It wasn't just about pride anymore, it was about safety. Something was happening in that house that didn't feel right. I started driving by more often late at night. Sometimes I saw lights flickering inside at odd hours, and once I saw Marcus arguing with someone in the driveway. He didn't notice me, but from the way he moved, tense, angry, I knew it wasn't good. I began to wonder if the debts I'd heard about were catching up to him. Still, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't want to scare them. They'd already been through enough. But each night as I lay awake, I kept thinking about how quickly a simple act of love had turned into all this. I just wanted to give my parents peace, and now none of us had any. Then one evening my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was low and tense. "You better tell your brother to handle his business," the man said. "Because next time it won't just be a warning." And just like that, the line went dead. I froze, staring at my phone, my heart pounding. I didn't know who that was or what Marcus had gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. This was no longer just a family argument. It was something deeper, darker, and far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. And standing there, holding that phone, I realized my fight to protect my parents was only just beginning. That phone call haunted me for days. Every time I replayed that voice in my head, cold, low, and threatening, I felt my stomach twist. I didn't know what kind of trouble Marcus was in, but whatever it was, it had spilled over into our lives now. I tried calling him again, but as usual, there was no answer. I left him messages telling him that he needed to talk to me, that I could help if he'd just be honest. But the silence on his end only made the tension worse. My parents noticed something was off, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them about the call. I didn't want to scare them more than they already were. The next week, I drove by the mansion again. This time, I didn't park across the street. I pulled right into the driveway, determined to get answers. The front yard was messy, toys left scattered, grass uncut, weeds climbing up the side of the walkway. It was hard to believe this was the same beautiful home I had proudly handed to my parents months ago. When Marcus finally opened the door, he looked exhausted. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair messy, and he seemed nervous, constantly glancing behind him. Before I could say anything, he whispered, "You shouldn't be here." That hit me. I asked what was going on, but he shook his head and told me to leave. I wasn't about to back down. I pushed my way in, and the moment I stepped inside, I noticed the difference. The warm, inviting feeling the house used to have was gone. The curtains were shut tight, the lights dim, and there were boxes stacked in the hallway. Something about the whole scene felt wrong. I asked him directly, "Who called me?" He looked shocked for a second, then tried to play dumb. "What are you talking about?" he said, pretending not to know. But his voice trembled, and I could tell he was hiding something. I told him about the threat, about how this wasn't just about our parents' house anymore. He rubbed his face, pacing back and forth before saying quietly, "It's not what you think." But he wouldn't explain further. He just said, "I'll handle it. Don't get involved." That was the last thing I wanted to hear. I reminded him that Mom and Dad were suffering because of this, that they were living in a tiny apartment while he turned their dream home into a disaster. His expression changed then, anger mixed with shame. "You think you can just throw money at people and fix everything?" he snapped. "You don't know what it's like to have everyone expect you to be something you're not." His words cut deep. For a moment, I saw the hurt little brother I used to know, the one who always felt overshadowed. But before I could say anything, there was a loud knock at the door. Marcus froze. He looked at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "You need to go. Now." The knock came again, louder this time. He motioned toward the back door, but I didn't move. Then I heard voices outside, low, impatient, not friendly. It was clear whoever was out there wasn't dropping by for a friendly visit. I didn't want to drag him into a fight on the porch, so I slipped out quietly through the kitchen door and made my way back to my car. As I drove off, I glanced in the mirror. 2 men had stepped onto the porch, dressed in black, talking to Marcus. He didn't look like a man in control, he looked cornered. Back home I couldn't sleep. I sat up all night thinking about how quickly things had spiraled. My gift, meant to honor my parents, had become the stage for something darker. I started wondering if those men were connected to the debts I'd heard about. If Marcus had borrowed money using the house as leverage, that could explain everything. But how far had it gone? And how could I stop it without dragging my parents deeper into it? Meanwhile, Mom's health started slipping. The stress was too much for her. She was barely eating, and her usual cheerful energy had faded. One night, she said quietly, "I just want us all to be together again like before." That broke me. I promised her that I'd make it right, even though I didn't know how yet. I could see the disappointment in my father's eyes too. He tried to stay strong, but I could tell he blamed himself, like maybe he'd failed somehow as a parent. But none of this was their fault. A few days later, I went to see a family friend, Mr. Lewis, who used to work in real estate. I wanted to understand what Marcus could have done with the house legally. When I showed him the property records, his face tightened. "There's a lien on this house," he said. My heart dropped. That meant Marcus had used the property as collateral for a loan he clearly hadn't told me about. I asked how that was possible since the house was under my name, but Mr. Lewis explained that if someone forged documents or pretended to be an authorized party, it could happen. The idea that Marcus might have gone that far was hard to believe, but the evidence was right there. I felt betrayed and scared at the same time. Betrayed because Marcus had taken advantage of me and our parents. Scared because this was no longer just a family issue, this was legal trouble. I wanted to confront him again, but I needed proof first. I started gathering paperwork, contacting the bank, and talking to my lawyer again. The deeper I went, the clearer it became that Marcus was in deep with people who wouldn't just walk away quietly. In the middle of all this, I kept thinking about his wife, Denise. I hadn't spoken to her much since everything started, so I decided to reach out. When I finally got her on the phone, she sounded tired, her voice strained. "I didn't want it to go this far," she said. I asked what she meant, but she hesitated. "Marcus thought he could fix things fast, that he'd pay it all back before you found out. He didn't mean for it to turn out like this." I asked her who he owed money to, but she just whispered, "People you don't want to know." Before I could ask more, she hung up. That call left me with more questions than answers. I started realizing that this wasn't just about greed. Marcus was trapped in something dangerous, and instead of asking for help, he'd dragged the whole family down with him. But what scared me most was the thought that whoever those men were, the ones at the door that night, they might come after more than just him if things didn't get handled soon. Days passed, and every time my phone rang, I tensed up, half expecting another threat. I didn't tell my parents about any of it. They were already worried enough. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep this from them forever. The situation was building toward something that felt like it could explode at any moment. One evening, as I was sorting through papers in my office, I noticed my phone light up. It was Marcus. I hadn't heard from him in over a week. My hands shook as I answered. His voice was quiet, broken. "I messed up," he said. "I don't know what to do anymore." I could hear shouting in the background, doors slamming, kids crying. Then the line cut off. For a moment I just stood there, frozen. My mind raced. I didn't know where he was or who was with him, but I knew one thing. Whatever trouble he was in, it had finally caught up to him. And now, it wasn't just about saving my parents' home anymore. It was about saving my brother before everything, and everyone, was lost. When that call from Marcus cut off, my heart felt like it stopped for a moment. I stood there, staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. I tried calling him back over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. The panic in his voice still echoed in my ears. He sounded desperate, scared, like a man who'd run out of options. I knew then that something serious was happening, something way beyond family arguments or legal trouble. I couldn't just sit and wait anymore. I had to find him. I grabbed my keys and drove straight toward the mansion. The streets were dark and empty, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white. All I could think about was my brother, my parents, and how everything had spiraled so far out of control. The house came into view, sitting at the top of the hill, its windows glowing faintly. It looked peaceful from the outside, too peaceful. When I pulled up, I noticed Marcus's car parked crookedly by the driveway. The front door was half open, swinging slightly with the breeze. That sight sent a chill down my spine. I stepped out of the car slowly, listening for any sound, a voice, footsteps, anything. But the only thing I could hear was the faint rustle of trees and the distant hum of the city below. Inside, the house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room. The air felt heavy, thick with tension. Boxes were still scattered everywhere, furniture out of place, and I could tell there had been a struggle. A chair was overturned and a few picture frames lay shattered on the floor. My heart pounded harder with every step I took. "Marcus," I called out, my voice echoing through the silence. No answer. I checked the kitchen, the hallway, and the stairs. Nothing. Then I heard it, a faint sound from upstairs. It was like a muffled cry or maybe a whisper. I froze, trying to pinpoint where it came from. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to move. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, one hand gripping the railing, the other ready to call for help if I had to. Halfway up, I saw a shadow move at the end of the hallway. I couldn't tell if it was Marcus or someone else. When I reached the top, I heard his voice. "Don't come any closer," he said, his tone shaky but firm. I turned toward the sound and saw him standing in the doorway of the master bedroom. His face was pale, his eyes tired and red. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Marcus," I said softly, "what's going on?" He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "I tried to fix it," he said. "I thought I could handle everything before you found out." His words came out in pieces, rushed and panicked. I took a step closer, but he backed away. "They said they'd leave us alone if I gave them the house," he said quietly. "But it wasn't enough. They want more." My chest tightened. "Who, Marcus? Who wants more?" I asked, my voice rising. He didn't answer right away. He just looked past me down the hallway as if expecting someone to appear. "They said if I didn't pay up, they'd come for all of us," he whispered. His hands were trembling. I could see the fear in his eyes, real fear, the kind that runs deep. Before I could ask more, headlights flashed through the front window. I turned toward the sound of tires crunching over gravel. My stomach dropped. 3 black cars had pulled into the driveway, their engines still running. Marcus's face went pale. "They're here," he whispered. Everything happened fast after that. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back stairs. "We have to go," he said. "You don't understand what they'll do." I tried to ask who they were, but his voice cracked as he said, "It's too late to talk." As we moved through the dark hallway, I heard the front door open downstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed against the marble floor. Voices murmured, low, calm, but commanding. Whoever they were, they didn't sound like people who came to talk things out. My heart pounded in my ears as Marcus motioned for me to stay quiet. We ducked into the laundry room, crouching behind a cabinet. I could hear the men moving through the house, opening doors, calling his name. I wanted to run, but Marcus grabbed my arm tightly. "If they see you, it'll get worse," he whispered. I could feel him shaking beside me. In that moment, I didn't see the brother who had betrayed our parents. I saw the scared kid I used to protect when we were younger, hiding from storms in our old house. The voices grew louder. One of the men said, "He's upstairs." I froze. They were coming closer. Marcus looked at me and mouthed, "Go." I shook my head. He whispered again, "Please go." His eyes were full of guilt and something else, determination. Before I could stop him, he slipped out of the hiding spot and down the hall. I stayed still, afraid of what was about to happen. I heard shouting. "Marcus!" someone yelled. Then came the sound of something heavy falling, followed by footsteps rushing across the floor. I stepped out, heart racing, trying to find him. When I reached the landing, I saw one of the men standing near the front door, his back turned to me, speaking into a phone. I couldn't make out what he said, but his tone was serious, impatient. Then I saw Marcus in the corner of the living room, his hands raised, his voice trembling. "I have it," he was saying. "Just give me more time." The man closest to him took a step forward, his voice low but sharp. "You've been saying that for weeks. Time's up." I wanted to intervene, but I didn't know how. I could feel my pulse racing as I stayed hidden behind the wall. I didn't know what Marcus had gotten himself into, but the fear in his eyes told me it was bad, worse than I had imagined. One of the men glanced toward the stairs, and for a split second our eyes met. "He saw me." "Someone's here," he said. Everything exploded in that moment. Shouting, footsteps, chaos. I ducked behind the wall as Marcus yelled my name. My mind was racing. I had to think fast. I had to get us both out of there before things went any further. The men moved fast, spreading out through the house. I could hear drawers slamming, doors opening, their voices overlapping. I slipped toward the kitchen, searching for any way out. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus running down the hallway, one of the men chasing him. My instinct took over. I stepped into the hallway and shouted his name, drawing the man's attention away. For a brief moment, everything slowed down. Marcus's panicked face, the sound of footsteps thundering through the house, the flickering light from the lamp. I didn't know what was about to happen next, but I knew this was it. The moment everything had been leading to. As I turned toward Marcus, he shouted something I'll never forget. "Don't let them take it." His voice was full of desperation and fear. I didn't know if he meant the house, the money, or something deeper. But before I could ask, the front door burst open wider and more voices filled the air. And in that split second, standing in the middle of the chaos that had once been my family's dream home, I realized this wasn't just a fight about a mansion anymore. It was about everything we'd lost trying to hold on to it. And the real battle was only just beginning. For a moment, everything inside the mansion felt frozen. Time, sound, breath. Then all at once, the chaos exploded again. Marcus shouted my name, and before I could move, one of the men lunged forward. I stumbled back, narrowly dodging him as he reached out, yelling, "You shouldn't be here." The anger in his voice wasn't random, it was fear-driven, like he was protecting something. I ducked behind the wall, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Marcus ran past me toward the back of the house, shouting for me to go. I followed him, but before we could reach the door we heard sirens, faint at first, then getting louder. The men froze. One of them looked out the window, muttered a curse, and signaled to the others. Within seconds they scattered. A car door slammed outside and two of them bolted through the side gate. Marcus turned to me wide-eyed. "You called the cops?" he whispered. I shook my head, still catching my breath. "No, I didn't." He stared at me for a long second before saying, "Then who did?" The sirens stopped abruptly, replaced by the crunch of tires on gravel. A police car was parked outside, but only one officer stepped out, a tall man in plain clothes. He didn't look like the type to handle routine calls. He glanced at the mansion, then at me and Marcus through the doorway. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Marcus hesitated before nodding. Yeah, we're fine." The officer didn't look convinced. His eyes moved around the room, taking in the overturned furniture, the shattered frames, the tension hanging in the air. "You sure about that?" he said quietly. For a moment none of us spoke. Then Marcus exhaled shakily and muttered, "They were here again." That was enough to make my stomach twist. The officer stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to come with me, Marcus. We've been looking for you." The words hit like a thunderclap. I turned to my brother, completely thrown off. "Looking for you? What's he talking about?" Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. He just whispered, "It's not what you think." The officer sighed. "We've had reports about this property, suspicious activity, unregistered transactions, people coming and going at odd hours. You've been under investigation for weeks." My head spun. "Wait," I said, "are you saying Marcus is involved in something criminal?" The officer looked at me but didn't answer directly. "Right now, I'm saying your brother needs to explain a few things down at the station." Marcus shook his head, stepping back. "No, I can't. You don't understand, they'll come after us if I talk." The fear in his voice didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like someone trapped between two bad choices. The officer reached for his radio, but Marcus turned and ran out the back door before he could react. I called out his name, but he was gone in seconds, disappearing into the dark night. The officer swore under his breath and ran after him, but I stayed frozen where I stood, trying to process everything. My brother, the same one who once shared my dreams of giving our parents a better life, was now being hunted not only by the people he owed money to but also by the law. And I had no idea how deep he'd gotten. Over the next few hours, I sat outside the mansion waiting, hoping he'd come back. But instead, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a single sentence: "If you want your brother safe, you'll bring what he owes." My blood ran cold. I didn't know what it meant. Money, documents, something hidden in that house? Whatever it was enough to make strangers threaten both of us. I went back inside, searching through every drawer, every box, every folder Marcus had left behind. I found bills, receipts, and letters, most of them unopened. Then, buried under a stack of old mail, I found an envelope with my name written on it. Inside was a short note in Marcus's handwriting: "If anything happens, check the study. It's all there." I ran to the study, the one room in the house that had always been locked since he moved in. I'd assumed it was just storage, but when I turned the handle, the door creaked open easily. Inside, there were papers everywhere: contracts, loan documents, bank statements. And then, in the middle of the desk, a small metal box. I opened it and froze. Inside were thick bundles of cash, a few IDs with different names and a small flash drive. My hands started shaking as I picked it up. Before I could think, I heard movement outside. Tires on gravel again, but this time no sirens. I looked through the window and saw 2 cars pulling up quietly, headlights off. The same black cars from before. My pulse quickened. I knew whoever was inside wasn't there to talk. I turned off the light and crouched behind the desk, gripping the flash drive tightly. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Voices, low, confident, and closer this time. One of them said, "He left something behind. The boss wants it." Another replied, "Then find it. We're not leaving empty-handed." Every sound seemed louder, the ticking of the clock, my breathing, the soft creak of the floor under their boots. I stayed still, praying they wouldn't come into the study. But luck wasn't on my side. The door handle turned slowly and light spilled into the room. I didn't think. I bolted out the side door, sprinting through the backyard. The cold air hit my face as I ran toward the car. I could hear them shouting behind me, their footsteps pounding closer. My mind was spinning, about Marcus, the money, the flash drive, my parents. How did everything spiral into this? I jumped into the car and started the engine. Just as I was pulling out, I saw one of the men standing in the driveway watching me. He didn't chase me. He just pointed at me, calm, deliberate, and mouthed something I'll never forget. "You're next." That drive felt endless. My hands shook the whole way, the flash drive still clutched in my pocket. I didn't know what was on it, but I knew it had to be the reason all this started. When I finally made it to my parents' apartment, I didn't tell them everything. I just said that Marcus was in trouble and that they needed to stay somewhere safe for a while. My father didn't argue, he just nodded. Later that night, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. What I saw made my heart drop. There were spreadsheets, documents, and messages, evidence of a business Marcus had gotten tangled in. It wasn't just debt. It was a full-blown scheme involving money laundering through fake property investments. And some of the names listed in those files weren't strangers. They were powerful people. People who wouldn't want this getting out. That's when I realized the real danger wasn't just for Marcus anymore. It was for anyone connected to him, including me. The house, the money, everything, it was all part of something much bigger than I could have imagined. As I sat there staring at the screen, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "Now you know. Return what's ours, or your family pays next." I froze, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't know where Marcus was or who these people really were, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about family or money anymore. It was about survival. And whatever was coming next was going to change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in front of the laptop, staring at the screen and the documents that had turned my whole world upside down. My brother's face flashed in my mind over and over. His nervousness, his guilt, his silence when I asked him what was going on. Everything made sense now. He wasn't just being careless or greedy, he was scared because he was stuck in something much darker than debt. The people after him weren't just collectors. They were powerful, dangerous, and desperate to keep their secrets buried. When the sun came up, I made a decision. I couldn't just wait for Marcus to show up or for those people to come knocking again. I needed to find him before they did. I packed the flash drive, a few essentials, and drove toward the city, following the last lead I had, an old warehouse address mentioned in one of the documents. It was listed under a shell company that Marcus had apparently helped set up. The area was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your instincts go on alert. I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the way, my heart pounding in rhythm with every step. The warehouse looked abandoned from the outside, but when I got closer, I could hear voices inside. I pressed my ear against the metal door and froze. One of those voices was Marcus. I pushed the door open just a crack and saw him standing there, hands raised, surrounded by 3 men in dark suits. The same man who had pointed at me days earlier stood in front of him, calm and menacing. "You had one job, Marcus," the man said quietly. "To make the money disappear, not the evidence." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I can fix it, just give me time." "Time?" The man smiled coldly. "You've had enough of that." He reached into his jacket, and that's when I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I stepped inside and shouted, "Stop." All eyes turned to me. Marcus's eyes widened in shock. "What are you doing here?" he shouted. "I have what they want," I said, holding up the flash drive. "You leave him alone and I'll give you this." The man looked at me with mild amusement, like a cat studying a mouse. "You," he said. "You think you're in control?" He nodded at one of his men who started walking toward me. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. "You should know," I said, The police already have a copy of everything on this drive. If anything happens to us, it all goes public." For a moment there was silence. The man stopped, eyes narrowing. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said, praying he'd believe it. He studied me for what felt like forever before slowly lowering his hand. "You're smart," he said finally. "Smarter than your brother, at least." Then he turned to Marcus. "You should thank her. She just saved you, this time." He motioned to his men, and they walked out without another word. The sound of their car engines fading into the distance was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. But the relief didn't last. Marcus sank to the floor, breathing hard. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice cracking. "Now they'll come for both of us." "I couldn't just do nothing," I said. "But you need to tell me everything now. No more secrets." So he did. He told me how it started, how he got involved with a group that claimed they could help him flip high-end properties and multiply his returns. He thought it was legitimate until it was too late to back out. They'd used him to move money around to make fake property sales look real. The mansion I gifted our parents had even become part of their laundering network without me knowing. When Marcus tried to pull out, they threatened him and his family. That's why he moved everyone in, to keep them under his watch. I felt sick hearing it all, but at least now I understood the truth. "You have to come clean," I told him. "It's the only way." He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "I know. I just didn't want to drag you or Mom and Dad into it." The two of us drove straight to the police station, the flash drive still in my pocket. The same officer who'd shown up at the mansion was there. When he saw us, he didn't look surprised, almost like he'd been waiting. Marcus told him everything. The officer listened quietly, occasionally jotting down notes. When it was over, he nodded and said, "You did the right thing. It's going to take time, but we'll make sure your family's protected." Walking out of that station felt like a weight had lifted, but it also left a hollow ache. Our parents didn't know yet. They'd been so proud of us, of everything we'd built. How was I supposed to tell them the truth, that the very gift I gave them had nearly destroyed us? A few weeks passed. The investigation moved forward, arrests were made, and Marcus was cooperating. It wasn't easy, there were moments I thought we'd lose everything. But then one afternoon I got a call from the officer. "We traced some of the assets back to legitimate accounts under your name," he said. "Looks like your brother made sure your share stayed clean." That hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, Marcus had tried to protect me. Months later, when things finally started to calm down, I went back to the mansion. It was quiet again, like it had been before all the chaos. I walked through the empty halls, remembering the laughter, the family dinners, the dreams we had for that house. I thought about how easily love, pride, and guilt can twist together until you can't tell them apart. As I was leaving, I noticed an envelope slipped under the front door. It had no name on it, just my initials. Inside was a single note: "You played your part well. But the game isn't over." I looked around, my pulse quickening, but no one was there. The street was empty. I read the note again, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. I thought we were finally done with all of it. But that message told me otherwise. Someone out there still wanted something, and we might not be as safe as we thought. That was the moment I realized that even though the main storm had passed, the ripples were still spreading. The truth had saved us, but it had also exposed us. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus and I hadn't seen the last of the people behind it all. As I locked the door and walked away from the mansion one last time, I promised myself something. I wasn't going to let fear control us anymore. They might have started this, but now I knew their game. And next time I'd be ready. But as I got into my car, I noticed something that made my heart stop. In my rearview mirror, a black car was parked 2 houses down. The same kind of car from before. Its engine wasn't running, but I could feel the weight of someone watching. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and drove off without looking back, knowing this story wasn't over yet. The moment I drove away from that mansion, everything inside me felt heavy: fear, guilt, and a strange kind of peace that came from knowing I had finally faced the truth. The black car stayed in my mirror for a while, but after a few turns, it disappeared into the traffic. Still, the uneasiness never left. It lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake off. For weeks after that night, I lived with my phone always in reach, checking over my shoulder everywhere I went. But nothing happened. No calls, no threats, no strange messages. Just silence, the kind that feels both safe and haunting at the same time. Marcus was placed under protection while cooperating with the authorities. The case grew bigger than any of us imagined. The men behind the laundering scheme were connected to a chain of fake property investments that stretched across multiple states. The police managed to dismantle most of their operations using the evidence from the flash drive. It turned out that Marcus's decision to hold onto that data, even without understanding how valuable it was, ended up saving countless people from falling victim to the same scam. I visited Marcus once he was moved to a secure facility outside the city. When I walked in, he looked tired but relieved. The weight that had been crushing him for years seemed to have lifted. "I messed everything up," he said softly. "I thought I could fix things my own way. But I almost destroyed us all." I sat beside him and said, "You made mistakes, yeah. But you also made it right in the end. You told the truth. That's what matters." He smiled faintly. "You saved me," he said. "If you hadn't shown up that night," he stopped mid-sentence, shaking his head, "I don't think I'd be here now." I didn't want to think about that. What mattered was that he was alive, and we had a second chance to put our family back together. When our parents found out the full truth, they were heartbroken but also grateful. They didn't care about the mansion or the money anymore. They just wanted peace. My father said something that stuck with me: "A home is only worth what it's built on. If it's built on lies, it'll crumble no matter how beautiful it looks." Those words made me see everything differently. I had spent so much time chasing success, believing that giving my parents luxury was the ultimate act of love. But real love wasn't in the marble floors or the big gates. It was in honesty, loyalty, and standing by each other even when everything falls apart. We sold the mansion soon after the investigation ended. It took months to clean up the legal mess, but eventually the property was cleared and put back on the market. The proceeds went toward paying off whatever debts Marcus still owed and helping victims who lost money to the scheme. It felt right, like we were finally breaking the cycle. Life didn't go back to normal overnight, but it did start to heal in quiet, steady ways. My parents moved into a smaller home near the lake, a cozy place filled with light and laughter instead of secrets. Every Sunday we had dinner together again. My mom would cook her favorite dishes, my dad would tell stories about the old neighborhood, and sometimes we'd even joke about the madness we'd survived. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Marcus, after months of cooperating with the police, was given leniency. He had to start over from scratch, but this time he did it the right way. He found work at a local construction company, using his skills to help rebuild homes that had been damaged in the area. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him purpose. I remember him telling me one afternoon, "It feels good to build something honest again." I could see in his eyes that he meant it. As for me, I poured my energy into creating something meaningful out of everything that happened. I started a small real estate consulting firm focused on transparency and ethical investments. My story became a lesson I shared openly, not to gain sympathy, but to warn others about how easily greed and pride can lead good people astray. The mansion that once represented success became a reminder that true wealth has nothing to do with numbers, but with integrity and peace of mind. Months turned into a year, and slowly the dark memories started to fade. But one evening, just as I began to feel like everything was finally behind us, I got a small package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photograph of the mansion, taken from across the street at night. There was a note attached: "You did good. But remember, not everyone got caught." My heart skipped. For a second, all the old fear came rushing back. But then I noticed something. The handwriting wasn't the same as before. It was neater, calmer, and on the back of the photo, in small letters, someone had written, "Keep watching." I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it was someone warning me. Maybe it was one of the victims who wanted me to stay alert. Or maybe it was just someone trying to scare me. Either way, I took it as a reminder: the past doesn't disappear completely. It lingers, waiting to see if you've really learned your lesson. I didn't tell my parents or Marcus about the photo. I just put it away in a drawer and locked it. Then I looked out my window and saw my reflection. Older, wiser, maybe a little scarred, but still standing. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel scared. I felt grounded. The mansion, the flash drive, the threats, they had all been chapters of a story I never planned to write, but one I'll never forget. It taught me that family isn't perfect, and neither are we. But love has a strange way of surviving even when everything else collapses. It also showed me that sometimes, the things we build for others end up teaching us the hardest lessons about ourselves. Now, when I think back to the day I handed my parents the keys to that $4 million home, I don't see failure or regret anymore. I see a beginning, messy, painful, but meaningful. That gift wasn't about money or luxury. It was the first step in a journey that forced us all to grow up, face our flaws, and rebuild something stronger. Marcus and I visit our parents every weekend now. We laugh more. We talk honestly. There are no secrets between us anymore, no pretenses. Every time I see my brother smile, I'm reminded that forgiveness can rebuild what even money can't replace. And though a part of me still wonders who sent that last message, I've learned not to let fear control me. Life goes on, and the best way to silence the ghosts of the past is to keep living with truth and purpose. So, in the end, that story, the one that began with a $4 million mansion and a shattered family, became a lesson in what truly matters. Not wealth, not pride, but love, redemption, and the courage to start again. And maybe that's what life is about, losing everything you thought you wanted, just to discover what you really needed all along.